Are you happy in your business? Now, I have had my share of emotional ups and downs in my 20 years of being a solo entrepreneur coach. And the patterns I've seen in myself and in my clients is that those downs are usually when I was personally feeling unfulfilled. Sometimes it was because a launch that flopped, and sometimes it was just life and had nothing to do with business. But those ups, oh boy, those are the times when I was feeling my most authentic and completely aligned to my purpose, or when I just felt like I was rocking that work-life balance. I would be thinking I could do this all day long and never feel tired. One of my loves is sharing what works for me and what has been working for my clients to achieve this very feeling, full of passion, happiness, peace, and freedom. So I decided to create a private podcast for coaches. Maybe you just want to develop better communication skills that boosts engagement, leads to better results, and makes you feel like you're actually making a difference in the lives of the people you serve. Then you're invited too. We talk about this and more in the UBU private podcast for coaches. Whether you're a mentor, a parent, or run a client-focused business, coaching skills benefit everyone and anyone who wants to communicate in a way that builds relationships. Fall in love with your life and business again. Click the link in the show notes for your invitation to join us right now. Then come back and enjoy this episode. It's time to stop comparing yourself to others and plug into what is uniquely you. Welcome to Unbox Your Personality, the podcast for coaches, parents, and mentors like you who understand that your happiness makes you more effective at what you do, bringing out the best in others. I'm Jen P. Higgins, personality strategist and Enneagram fluff remover. Get laser focused on who you are and who you aren't, so you're free to make the impact you were born to make. And have fun doing it. Your personality is your business. So let's get down to business.
Tell me more about the experience gap. When I read about the experience gap, it reminded me about what can happen between a mother and a daughter or any two people, what our intention is versus what is experienced by the other person. And if that experience gap is not closed or understood, then that's where the gap becomes wider and wider and the relationship becomes, what's the word I'm thinking?
It suffers.
It suffers. Yes, the relationship suffers no matter if it's a married couple, a mother-daughter, friends. Like the intention is pure typically, but the experience from the other person on the other person's side is they're not getting that same feeling. I just feel like it made me think about the mother-daughter art project and how, because it's a connection box and there's so much conversation that happens, what my aspiration is that there will be fewer and fewer experience gaps. And when there is an experience gap, that they can actually talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminds me also of my marriage. We celebrated 25 years last summer. And, it's by far the perfect marriage. But my husband said the perfect thing on that day when we were around other people. He said, we don't have a perfect marriage. It's how we navigate the bumps. So it's those bumps that are the experience gaps sometimes where I'm intending something and he takes it a different way than I intended. And we have to just talk it through and hear each other and then, move forward.
And stay curious and ask the right questions, which is what you're teaching these young ladies to be able to do also, right?
Exactly.
So experience gaps are a given. So if we just go ahead and assume that there's a gap, our relationships will already improve. Just making that assumption that a gap exists, because we're all different people. We're all we have different perceptions. Even people with the same personality, the same Enneagram type, I mean, they're going to have different perceptions. They're going to have similar patterns, but different experiences, if that makes sense. And so when we start automatically assuming, oh my gosh, those emotional boundaries are so much easier to keep because you don't have to take things personally when you understand there's a gap and they, for lack of a better term, they just don't get it. They don't get it. And that's okay. Like I don't always get why I do the things I do. The Enneagram has really helped me put vocabulary and language to why I do the things that I do that normally I wouldn't have been able to put in that context. Like to understand, oh, I don't like that because I feel limited. Or when somebody asks me a question and my first reaction is to ask, what are my options? The experience gap might look like, oh, she's not on board with this. Oh, it's not that I'm not on board. I just would like to know what my other options are. So then I know how to prioritize which option I'm on board with more. And so, or even just my inclination to be a spin doctor and find the good in everything and be optimistic. I mean, it's relentless optimism. And sometimes I laugh at myself. I was like, if I wasn't so dang optimistic, I probably would have been able to process these insert negative emotion or negative situation or something that I was avoiding because there was some kind of negative or painful association to it. That's what type 7s tend to do. They'll avoid those like the plague, and in return we'll swap them out for fun, adventure, or just being busy, because the definition of fun and adventure is going to be different for every type 7. A type 7 might find reading comic books in their bedroom as fun and adventurous. That doesn't make them any less type 7. They may look like a stereotypical type 5, let's say, but it doesn't make them any less type 7 if you're looking at the motivations instead of the behaviors and why they're doing that. So when it comes to the experience gap, already understanding that through the Enneagram gives language to it. Okay, for example, my husband and I, he's a type 9 who doesn't really like conflict. And so whenever I am not immediately on board with something that he suggests, his personality paintbrush is painting a conflict scene. And it's almost like he starts backpedaling and like, oh, it's okay. We don't have to do it my way. We can do it your way, which is that knee-jerk reaction for a type 9 to be self-effacing and to be, at ease and chill and kind of go with the flow. And that's not what I'm doing at all. In fact, I might be thinking about, well, how is this going to fit into my schedule? Is this going to affect the fun things I have planned later on? Or I could just be asking in my head, well, what are my other options? Like, instead of doing that, could we rearrange it and then do this way? And then we can kill two birds with one stone. And then it's all win, 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 win. But because I may not have verbalized that, I was thinking it. So the experience he's receiving is me looking off into space, kind of just thinking, maybe with a neutral look on my face. He's processing it as conflict. And I'm processing it as, what are the other possibilities that could happen? And that is the way we respond to that is probably more at the root of conflict between relationships than anything else. And just knowing that there is going to be an experience gap, and if you do know the other person's personality type or their Enneagram type, you can bypass all that. There's so much to bypass because now you're not taking things personally. You're owning your feelings and they're owning their feelings, or at least you're allowing them to own their feelings. We can't control them, but having that information in our pocket is so empowering in our relationships.
If we can just all remember, as I'm listening to you, just to stay curious no matter what. So I'm going to practice to say, tell me more about what you mean.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me more. rather than give a knee-jerk reaction or answer to something. I have to just practice, getting more information, just being curious so that the experience gap doesn't totally cause breakage.
Right. And so me as a type 7, I naturally ask questions. I would be, the why. That would be me as a kid. And I didn't ask why a lot. I just questioned things, maybe not necessarily out loud. I questioned things and then I would go explore and figure it out on my own. That was probably more of my motive operandus than the actual questioning. But questioning is something that comes naturally to me. What I have had to learn in my questioning is to let the other people know that I'm questioning and not judging.
You said that. I had that written down. Let me find it. You did. You said that. Assumptions are neutral and judgments hurt.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's really important for the other person to understand that when I ask a lot of questions also. They're not because I'm judging you, but just because I'm curious and I don't want to make assumptions. I just want to know. You ask a lot of questions, and it reminded me in the book, you said you ask a lot of questions to discover or figure out what type somebody is.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the questions you ask? And do you have to be pegged already?
I've started the process of elimination. So the way I teach my coaches is to really take a narrative approach. And it's basically a conversation like this. So a typing session is like having coffee with a friend. It's not really an interrogation. I do start off with asking about goals because you can learn a lot about someone based off of what they see in the future. And therapy, a lot of what therapy does is look at the past. And I do go into the past, but we have to explore the future first. It's almost like it gives it context. But a lot of times when we stay in the past only explains what's happening in the present. But if you look at the past and the present in context of what your goal is in the future, that gives me as the coach a much wider range of a lot more data. It gives me a lot more data to be able to process what motivates you. Because when we think about the past, sometimes it's about regret. When we think about the past, sometimes it could be achievements that were done in the past, but we're not seeing any fruit now in the present. And so just looking at the past, while it can be helpful to help you understand yourself and understand your layers and those kinds of things, it doesn't actually get to the root of what drives you.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I loved how you explained that in therapy, we talk about our past and how it got to where we are now, but thinking about ahead to the goals and how can we get to the goals? I never thought of it that way. Makes a lot of sense.
One of my favorite nuggets that was given to me that was from a therapist. I was struggling with a relationship and I was not owning my own feelings. I was actually taking on someone else's feelings that were not mine to carry. And so I remember sitting in therapy and saying, well, if I do that, then X, Y, and Z. And her answer was, well, those aren't your feelings. That's not your responsibility. And I'm like, oh, wait, there are my feelings and there are other people's feelings. Like I didn't have those emotional boundaries. I do identify as an empath. And I think that's the reason why, if you know anybody that's an empath, that's emotional boundaries are really, really hard to maintain because without awareness, we have no idea which ones are our emotions and which are someone else's emotions. And so I do have a book I recommend for that. That was eye-opening. And I asked her, I said, so how do I stop thinking like that? And I just remember she was sitting in her chair, leaned back, just so chill, had her pen in her hand, and she kind of talked with her hand like this, and she just went, you just think another thought. And I was like, really? Is it that simple? And it is. It is that simple that if you're going down a line of thinking, the only way to renew your mindset is to stop the pattern and think differently. Are you feeling a bit disappointed that you haven't finished that project yet? Are the kids' schedules impacting your business? Or are the demands of your business affecting your relationships at home? Maybe you need a magic formula for that work-life balance before your fire gets so dim or it completely burns out. I've been there. There was a point in my life where I was juggling 2 businesses and homeschooling and had personal health issues. There was barely time to even connect with myself, much less connect with my husband. When I was finally officially diagnosed with ADHD, I felt like that explained everything. I had a new perspective and started approaching things in a new way. So I created a guide containing 20 tips that I personally use, and they have worked for me for helping me stay on course with my goals. Now, you might not have ADHD, but I bet you can relate to having a million distractions during the day. So if you're ready to stop procrastinating or stop being hard on yourself for missing yet another deadline, self-imposed or not, go ahead and download the guide at powercoachjen.com. If you just find one tip from the list that helps you move forward today, you will be so glad you took the time to read it. Go to powercoachjen.com and download the guide right now.
I know that. I do that and I had to learn that because sometimes I will go down a rabbit hole of some thinking that is not healthy. I'm like, I need to switch this up. I'm just going to focus on something completely different. And I can resonate with being an empath. Also, I feel like I'm a sponge. I like absorb everybody's, I want to like take it away from them and I absorb it, not intentionally. And sometimes I have a physical reaction to like it like my chest concaves and I'm like absorbing it during negative feelings somebody else is feeling. And I'm trying to take it away from them. And I can't control it. And then it's just really hard to let it go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are hard times.
And so then it becomes a matter of creating systems, like you're curling your toes, coming up with systems and a game plan of when that comes up. And that's what the core framework helps us do, helps us come up with game plans to put in our playbook for these blocks that we have, these issues that we already know that we have, right? And then the Enneagram helps us see the blind spots, the blocks that we don't know that we have. And then coming up with the game plan so that, when you get triggered, because I know for myself, a lot of times I don't even recognize that I'm in a blind spot until I'm triggered. I wish it was not in that order, but I don't think I'm alone in that aspect. But whenever I do get triggered, I have this game plan in my back pocket that I can just pull out, and I have a generic game plan for whenever I have no idea what to do. So I have that generic game plan that works the majority of the time, at least for me. It may not necessarily work for the relationship if it has to do with someone else, but it definitely doesn't make it worse. because I'm able to regulate myself. So I put myself in a position where I can regulate myself because I can't give from an empty cup. I have to fill my cup up first. So I have a generic game plan for that. And then for specific things that I have a game plan for. So when it comes to boundaries that I go through, I have to pay attention to what is going on in my body when I am not holding an emotional boundary. Like you just described that whole concaveness, like you're already aware of that. So it would be using that as the trigger for your game plan and choosing a healthy response to that rather than the knee jerk response.
I read the book, and to absorb all of that, I found that taking the notes while I was reading and doing the active reading, because I really want to learn more about the Enneagram, I'm going to continue reading and taking notes so that I can create a game plan or two for myself for when I'm triggered. And I want to learn more. I'm fascinated with it.
And I think, I'm not sure if you've gotten to, because I know when I said, oh, I would love for you to come on as the Enneagram newbie and really get your take. We were really discussing part 2 of the book, which was a lot of the Enneagram symbols and the Enneagram infrastructure and those kinds of things. I think I'm going to suggest to really dive into part 3. It's a little bit more heady.
Yeah, that's where the colors are, right?
Yes, that's where the colors are.
And that's where I was like, okay, I need a break.
Yeah.
But I will get into a place where I can, read one chapter at a time or a part of a chapter at a time, take some notes, do some drawings like I did when I was reading my chapters 3 through 6 so that I can actually understand it. And now I know I have a translator I can reach out to.
That's right.
That's right. To sort it all out.
And honestly, I think that's where even Enneagram fans who are not new, when they get to part 3, I think everybody's having the same response because this is a new approach to the Enneagram. The 9 acknowledgement languages is not, that's something that I developed to help explain the Enneagram. And so you wouldn't be alone as far as going, okay, brain fried, time to like shut down, reset, reboot. So you're not alone in that. So what I've done is I have revamped my 9 acknowledgement languages course. And I'm bringing a little bit more of the brain science into the course to support what the 9 acknowledgement languages are. And I added a group coaching option so that, like you're saying, sometimes you need a translator. And so I'm doing that group coaching option. So there will be video lessons and a workbook to help people work through their Enneagram type and understanding the 9 acknowledgement languages, and even working through the core framework as well to get that generic game plan set so that we have an escape plan, at least one that we know that is going to reset us. Bring all your questions because I would love more than anything to be able to simplify the Enneagram for everybody who is interested in using it in such a way that doesn't keep them stuck there. And that's where I think a lot of people stop their Enneagram journey is because they don't realize there's something more. It's like, what is my type? The end. And the question is, what is my type? Now what? Now what do I do to get out of that box? And so if we don't ask ourselves that question, we really stunt our growth. And so my goal is to simplify the Enneagram to the point where, number one, you can find your type super easy and quicker than most approaches with less confusion. And then go ahead and get started on your growth journey because that's what we want to do. And if we start on our growth journey before we really understand all of the possible layers that we need to dig to get to that personality tripod of our core motivations and our core strengths and our core values, we limit the ability to climb our ladder.
I like the ladder idea too. The being able to, I'm just fast. I liked the ladder and how you had the little Lego Emmett guy. it was made it more accessible and easy to understand. So I think the book was well written, fun, easy to read. And I'm going to, keep my head down and keep chipping away at different parts of it.
Well, this has been a great conversation.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Did you get all your questions answered?
I got all my questions answered. I went back and I looked at my notes. Yep, everything you covered and everything.
Well, I certainly do appreciate you spending this time with me and being curious.
Yeah, well, if we all need to just stay curious for understanding and checking for understanding and closing those experience gaps. Not closing the experience gap, but right, because the gaps are always there, but checking in for understanding so that the experience gap doesn't widen, but it's there, and creating a bridge, which is what I'll just circle back again to the mother-daughter art project. It's a bridge, creating the scaffolding and bridge of your relationship so that when there is a disagreement, because actually the mother-daughter art project was birthed from a disagreement between my daughter and I. And I knew that we would get through this disagreement quickly because of the scaffolding and relationship that we had and the way we could talk to each other. And it was an experience gap looking back to it, right? And she was able to clarify what she needed, and I was able to explain what I needed. And then we came to this agreement so that the gap just, didn't widen. And I feel like it brought us closer for understanding. And I'm like, oh yeah, I want to do something for mothers and daughters. And so that's exactly how this whole thing for me was started. In the middle of an experience gap. Oh, yeah, that's it.
That's really cool. I did have one more thing to say about the experience gap. I like how you said we don't necessarily want to close. It's not necessarily closing the experience gap, but understanding that there is one, that it exists. And I want to make an argument to we don't want to close the experience gap. And I know I talk about closing the experience gap, but that gap really is a protection from enmeshment. And I can say that because I'm guilty of it. But, really making this assumption that what I'm feeling is what somebody else is feeling, these personality paintbrushes. But when we are more cognizant of the fact that there is an experience gap, that insinuates that we are two separate people. And it allows us to be separate, but together. And like what you're saying, we can build a bridge, but we don't need to be enmeshed.
Exactly.
We can even sit really, really close together and come together that way and walk together, but we don't need to become enmeshed.
So if people wanted to find me for the mother-daughter art project, it's on my website is amysartpalette.com, 1 L and 2 T's.
Yeah, and I will link that in the show notes too.
Thank you. Yeah.
Again, I am just so impressed with Amy's curiosity about herself and recognizing the many layers that make up our personality that can blind us from what the Enneagram is trying to teach us. And if you're ready to do the work and you love my approach, I encourage you to get on the communication list for the UBU grand opening right now. Go do it right now before you forget. I'll be emailing the early bird offer out really soon because the grand opening is February 22nd. You don't want to miss out on that. Go ahead and take 30 seconds right now. Visit go.unboxenneagram.com/grand and add yourself to the list so you don't miss out. That link is also in the show notes. It's going to be groundbreaking. It's time to stop the comparison game and step into being you. Your life is going to transform right before your eyes, from business to relationships to personal freedom and satisfaction. I can't wait to see you unleash your power. You never know what's going to come out of my mouth. But the process of learning how to draw the symbol not only solidifies the connectedness of it, but also the paths of growth and stress. It's really fascinating, actually. I won't get into it now, but that would be
I would be interested. I'm not a math person at all. Like like in second grade, my second grade teacher said, you can't do math. And since I have like this limiting belief that I can't do math. So I shut down all the time.
It is a mindset. You don't have to like math. I don't like math.
Yeah,
I appreciate math. That's what I should say. I appreciate math, but I definitely would prefer someone else to do the math.
I appreciate math. I want someone else to do my math, and anything with numbers. Like people say, what are your numbers? And like, I just don't hold it in my head. I just don't retain it.
You can train your body and train your brain to retain stuff like that, especially with your creative side, because our memories are linked to imagery, images. So one of the math multiplication curriculum that I use for my kids was called times tables. And so each of the times tables was a story. But it was the process of training, because my son could not hold it. He couldn't, like what you were saying, he couldn't grasp it. And even when we started teaching that, it wasn't until later that he finally started making the connections. But the images, so like the fact that you drew that symbol will help. So it's just like integrating the different modes of learning helps train the brain's memory. There's a guy, his name is Jim Quick. He talks about that a lot.
Okay.
But he had a brain injury, and he was known as the boy with the broken brain. And I don't remember all of his story, but he basically retrained his brain to grow different neural pathways.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah, it was super interesting. One of the tactics is to like eat and brush your teeth with your opposite hand, and it starts connecting new neural pathways. Think about all the stuff that we ignore because we focus on our dominant hand. When I was in the second grade, like my best friend in second grade, she was left-handed, and I wanted to be left-handed so bad because I thought it was so cool. She was the only person I knew that was left-handed. And so I would practice writing with my left hand. And the funny thing is that she only wrote with her left hand, and she did everything else with her right hand. Because that was in the time where like they wanted you to be right hand, or like softball, there were only right-handed things, right-handed helmets, right-handed gloves. And so
right-handed scissors.
Yes. And so, but she only wrote with her left hand. They did have left-handed desks back then. So I wanted to be left-handed like her. And so I would sit there and practice. And now I can write with my left hand. I still struggle with eating with my left hand. That scooping with the spoon, that scooping motion is kind of awkward, but I can bowl with my left hand. I actually bowl better with my left hand, which is really funny.
Are you a bowler?
I used to be. Did you see in the introduction, I say something about being in a bowling league, and then I put a.
Well, yeah, and then you had to go back and get the uniforms. That wasn't that part.
It was the first accident. The first accident, I was coming home from a bowling league. And then I did a reel, because the last time I was home with my parents, all my bowling trophies were in my old bedroom. And so I did a Facebook reel, a TikTok, where I was like, look at all these trophies, except for I was saying like, look at my cat.
So funny.
But it was pretty funny. But I'm not that good of a bowler.
You enjoy it.
I was good when compared to other seventh graders in the seventh grade. So I was the best seventh grade bowler, and that's why I got the trophies. But
right.
There was probably
we had bowling balls in our garden.
Really? For what?
Decoration.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, they're just kind of like, there's 3 of them, I think. We find them in the thrift store, and we kind of I can show you.
Yeah, I want to see.
Let's see. Look at my dog.
Aww.
He just sits there with me. Let's see. Here's one. Can you see that gold one?
Yeah.
And then there's a blue one.
What do they do? Just for decoration?
Yeah, they just find it in the thrift shop. We have a lot of color in our backyard, so we're just trying to bring some stuff to the front.
Thank you for listening, subscribing, and reviewing the Unbox Your Personality podcast. To learn more about yourself, go to powercoachjen.com. Find out how you are different so you can make your difference.